Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Freedom Filled Life podcast. I'm your host, Shay Brown, co founder of the Bucket List Bombshells, where we serve women who are building, growing, and scaling a service based online business. Now, today I am bringing on Jamie Jensen. She is actually one of my friends in the industry who we actually met in a mastermind about 10 years ago for women CEOs, which was really exciting because that mastermind is what also inspired us to start our own Scale with Purpose mastermind. And the impact that a mastermind can have on you and your network is tenfold. And so I'm really excited to be doing this interview today with you, Jamie, and having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And Jamie, just to give a little intro to her before we get her talking into her stories, Jamie is an award-winning screenwriter, marketer, and story sorceress. She partners with highly talented and accomplished entrepreneurs on developing brand and offer positionings, as well as novels and screenplays that make an impact, move audiences, and sell. So we're actually going to dive deeper into how we as entrepreneurs can do that and utilize some of these skills and strategies that Jamie is always talking about. So, Jamie, why don't we start with your story? Can you tell us a little bit about the business that you own and the services that you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I currently have a essentially branding, marketing, and copywriting agency that offers a blend of like consulting strategy and done for you services. And I also have a coaching arm of my business that is focused primarily on writing. And so in that arm of my business, I'm teaching a lot of storytelling tools and frameworks. And the folks that I work with in that arm of the business, which as of right now is known as the Story Lab, we are working on fictional projects in one track, and then I'm expanding it into like I do have clients I'm working with one-on-one on nonfiction projects as well. That's not currently like productized as a program. We'll see if it will eventually. But it is a lot of helping them with their books, with their novels, with their screenplays. I have someone in my program writing a pilot for television. Someone's writing a musical. And so like the creative works, as well as conversion content, right? So that's like I am working with them as a writing coach, but there is usually some link to, their career or their business that is important to them. And for some, it's just like, this is this thing on my heart that I needed to create. And now is the moment, now is the time. And I want to do it with excellence, right?
I love that. I love that. So amazing. And I know that it's been a long time in the industry for you and even finding the path to where you are now. Can you share with our listeners kind of what did that look like when you just got started to where you are now? What did you offer in the beginning? What did that journey look like? I know there's many listeners with us that are at multiple stages in business. And so I'd love to hear your journey, just where you started and where you are now.
I actually started as a coach. Okay. I started having gone to coaching school. I already had a background in film and television. So I was, I had worked in Hollywood, worked on TV shows, and felt, had made a feature film, right, independently, and wrote and directed, and had felt this sort of pull and call to be an entrepreneur, right, and to have my own business. And so the first thing I began exploring was coaching, and I went to a coach training program to do life coaching. And I felt very clear that I was going to coach writers. Like that's what I'm passionate about. It's where my expertise already was. And so I kind of started coaching writers. And it was by being in the world of the coaching industry that I became a copywriter, right? I became the person that everyone was like, how should I say this? What should I name this product? What's the tagline? How can we make it clever? What's the story I'm telling around this? What's the messaging? And I was just naturally so good at it for a series of reasons, right? Related to branding, marketing, et cetera, that it kind of just evolved into, oh, I have a copywriting business now. And I actually fired all of my coaching clients and was like, I just want to do copy. This is so fun. I'm good at it. I love that I get to like work with people on their story and their brand. So definitely like the clientele I serve has evolved since I started. I have, you know, launched courses and coaching programs. And after my first 4 years with a copywriting business, I pivoted out of that and transitioned all of my revenue over the year. Like literally, it took about 6 months to a year for me to pivot into that. And that was, I think, when we met. I pivoted all of my revenue to courses and coaching programs. And I've sort of come back around full circle to every time I try to scale my business, I miss the one-on-one, like every single time. And so I've really come back to my roots of like, I love doing the work I do. And so yeah, so now I guess it was last year I relaunched my agency brand, and I was like, this is the services that I want to be offering, and then have really retooled and re-strategized the coaching arm so that I can foundationalize it in storytelling, but then allow for different tracks depending on who wants to come through and get this frameworks and tools that really support them with whatever they're working on, whether it's business content or personal content, or if there's some crossover there. 'Cause that really is the sweet spot where I am excellent at holding people. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's amazing and such an interesting journey and pivot to come back, especially because of the shift that we've seen in the industry and people wanting that high touch point. It's exactly why Cassie and I switched and pivoted ourselves out of courses. And now we're still serving women who are launching, growing, and scaling, but we have one on one programs or group coaching programs at high touch. We are actually now coaches, and that's more what we refer to ourselves as, versus starting in the industry as course creators. Of course, before that, we were doing service-based work, the one-on-one work. And that is really what it came down to, was we missed really being able to connect on a deeper level. When our courses were on a smaller scale, we had a lot more touch points in them. And as we grew, and like, all the business coaches tell you to scale, scale, scale and get out of your business, we actually kind of found ourselves in a different position where we wanted to be back in and much more connected with our audience, with our community, and with the women that we were serving. So it's really fun to hear that you also had a similar pivot back to one-on-one services. And how did you come to this crossroads? Where was this decision made?
Yeah. I mean, I make all of my decisions intuitively. So I wish I
Mm,
could give you like, here's the
yeah.
rubric. The
No, girl, give
rubric
me the
is my
intuit. Like, yeah,
totally.
give me
The
that
rubric is
intuition.
my body was like, not this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Like
love that. Yeah.
honest rubric. I truly like I scaled. And who knows, like maybe there is some really funny like trauma response thing that I'm recreating. Like who knows? Like maybe there is some self-sabotaging behavior that is underlying my body being like no, and me moving back into like scaling things back again and getting more in touch with being able to be really intimately working with clients. Like honestly, I can't tell you. That is beyond my consciousness level to really say that's possible. But what I will say is that I first had a copywriting agency. I had a team of writers. And by the time I got to the point where I was really out of client delivery, I was like really bummed because I enjoyed the client delivery and I wanted to be doing more storytelling work, working, and which is the work I love. So which is the work I was doing with clients. So for me to become CEO is a whole different role. Um, that wasn't client facing, right? It's like I'm working with the team, not the clients. And so that was like the first time that I was like, burn it down. And then 4 years later, I've now grown my revenue and scaled my business into courses and coaching. And it's pretty much functioning, but I'm again, and I was still taking on one-on-one clients on a limited basis, but I again hit the point where I was like, burn it down. And I have to say, I think that there's something to be said for like the constant journey of being in alignment when you just are a seeker type person, which is just who I am, right? Not everyone is this way. Not everyone is really intuitive or a seeker, or feels the need to have freedom and flexibility in their business the way that I get to feel it when I'm working one-on-one versus like the systems and the structures and showing up a certain way or committing to a program that like is a forever commitment, the way that you build it. When you think about scaling a business really is narrowing in on an offer. And I think for me, something just was always missing for me in that. Maybe it is the multi-passionate aspect, maybe it is the intuitive aspect, but that's the honest truth is I just love what I do and I don't want to play a different role in my business than
Yeah.
than that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. It was a very similar crossroads for me, especially as the COO, the one that was very much in the operations, very much in just running the business versus actually getting to do the thing that we did, which was creating programs. And yes, we delivered them in course format, but delivering programs, teaching women how to start, launch, grow, scale businesses. I was somewhat removed from that, or felt I was removed from that, because it was much more about just running the business when you get to that seat, you wear that CEO hat, that COO hat. And
Mhm.
so it's really fun now working with women who are scaling, and I'm helping them avoid that, avoiding burnout, avoiding getting too far disconnected from your business and just running the team. Or if that's what you want, great, we can do that too. But I have found that many of the women that we're working with around that 6-figure mark are really feeling like, I want to still do the work, but I want to scale my business. And I feel like there's like this messaging disconnect that you have to stop doing the work and just run a team or run someone else to do it. So I love that you came to that pivot, and it was just like intuitive and natural. And you do have, you did have the reasons and the rubrics, I felt like, as you were explaining. So, but I want
It's
to tell you,
yeah,
oh,
it's
go on.
funny. I'm like the intuition decides first, and then the
Yeah.
mind is like, this makes sense. Look at all the sense
Exactly.
it makes.
Exactly. You find a strategy that works for the intuition's
Yeah,
decision.
totally.
I love that. Well, I would love to tap into your expertise on this call and really get into the meat and potatoes, as I like to say, as a small town girl,
Mhm.
for our listeners on the topic today around messaging, around conversions, around your brand. That's really your expertise there. And I was curious, for those who are at the stage of trying to fill their roster full time. So maybe they've had some work, they've brought in some clients, but they're kind of struggling to figure out, like, what is that conversion point? What is it that maybe is not working? And that could be maybe in their brand, their messaging. How can
Mhm.
we attract and convert more leads, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, the answer is going to be different depending on like what is actually going on in someone's business and their ecosystem, right? Which, so what I want to say, here's what I'll say. I'll say that most folks I know who are having trouble scaling their sales process, right? With their messaging, positioning, marketing, content, whatever, all of that stuff, there usually is a disconnect in clearly identifying who it is that they want to be attracting, and clearly identifying, like, I consider it like three different levels of what the desire is that is attracting the client to working with you. Like, there's levels. There's like the level of conscious awareness of what they know they want. Like, oh, I really, depending on what you support clients with. So like, let's say that you run a health program, maybe the conscious thing is like, they don't want to feel bloated anymore. So they want to eat foods that make them feel good. Or the conscious is they want to lose weight. Or the conscious is they want to know what they're eating every day and not feel like they're scrambling to make decisions and don't know what's best to support their body, right? Like, there's a conscious level. Then there's like the level underneath that, that's sort of like maybe the subconscious level, um, where it's in there, but it might not be the thing that they admit, right? Like, they might not admit it to themselves, but it is in there. It's sort of like a secret thing or a shameful desire or something that's sort of hiding. And then there's like the ultimate underneath layer, which is like the actual real deep reason, right? Which is usually connected to like what they most deeply care about, why it matters to them, and what they really want, that they think the top conscious like desire is going to give them. And so, what we really want to do is get into as much market research as possible. So, what I mean by that is obviously having conversations with your clients, looking for the trends and patterns among not just the people who are saying yes to working with you, but the people who are saying yes to working with you who you most love working with, right? Like, oh, well, let's look at what's working and then try to clone what's working, as opposed to like, oh, all these people said yes to working with me, but three of them were like, not my favorite. What we really want is to help you build a roster of clients that you're super excited to work with. And so what is the common denominator across all of them? Right. So we want to find the common denominator across the who, and the common denominator across like what's the top line thing they say they want, what's the secret hidden thing they're not willing to say they want, and what's the thing underneath that they may not even have connected, they think that that thing is going to give them, right? And so usually the deepest part is like it's the emotional piece, right? It's like, what is the feeling state they want to access? Sometimes it's a tangible thing, but often it's a feeling state, and we formulate language around that. So we're looking for something that's going to communicate very quickly what that desired outcome is. But in it, we're capturing the thing they're willing to admit, the thing where they're not willing to admit, and then the feeling state that they want to access. Right. So all of that, like it sounds like layered complexity, but when you actually start breaking these things down, you can have lists of words that represent each. It's like, oh, I'm creating, that is how we really come up with positioning your methodology, naming your framework, talking about a program or an offering or even a brand name, positioning it around that feeling state, that essence. Like it has to do with their identity, who they are, who they want to be, right? So all of those pieces start to converge when we are able to like really assess the deepest levels, psychologically of who our ideal clients are and like really those aspects. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question for that as most of our women are in digital marketing space. So either they're content marketers, social media managers, website designers, brand graphic designers. This is the core of the women in our community. And when we're thinking about those layers, how do we
Mhm.
tap into, like, it makes a lot of sense to me for a program for when we're coaching, when we're
Mhm.
offering one-on-one services, it's kind of business to business. How are
Mhm.
we tapping into the business to business desire? Is it still that personal desire of that owner, or is there some other way that we're really able to position ourselves B2B?
Yeah. So the specificity there would be like, what's the feeling state they don't have in their business that they want, right? Like, so it's like the deeper thing. Oh, they want to feel peaceful. They want to feel supported. They want to feel like in control. They want to feel on top of things. They want to feel powerful, right? Usually, who you pair well with as a service provider is going to have a particular personality type. The person that you work well with, like it's kind of like the opposites attract thing, right? You
Yeah.
understand what you're magnetizing because you
Mm-hmm.
you you match that, right? There's a framework called wealth dynamics. Is that what it's called? Well, I think it's called wealth
Sounds
dynamics.
familiar.
Yeah, okay. We'll have a follow-up for show notes if
Yeah,
that's wrong. But
absolutely.
but in that frame, it basically assesses your energy of how you best perform, and that creates the most wealth in your business. Okay, so when someone's looking at a chart of their wealth dynamics, and let's say there's different like archetypes, right? I'm a star, someone else is a lord, is usually more like a systems person, someone's like just a people person and supporter, right? So there's this sort of graph, and you tend to attract people who are like opposite,
That's
right?
so true.
Even
Yeah.
even in my, like, I remember I had a friend of mine run a guest expert training on this for a mastermind program that I used to lead. And it was fascinating because they took the test and everyone in my program was like almost to a T, the exact same type that was like pretty opposite mine. And I was like, oh, I'm just like, this is just who's attracted to me. They're like attracted to the opposite and the difference. But knowing that, it helps you identify like, what is that feeling state? So for B2B, it's like, what do they want to be feeling in their business that they're not feeling? What does they believe is going to give that to them? And how does that relate to the services that you offer? So let's say you're offering social media marketing services for someone who just doesn't want to spend all their time on social media, right? That feeling state might be freedom, it might be peace, it might be having more spaciousness for other things in their business they want to focus on strategically and logically, right? That the logic might be like the top line outcome is like they don't have enough time, but they need to create more results. And so the solution is to have someone that can come in and support there, and then they will get to feel what they want to feel and have the results they want, right? So you get that sort of pyramid of the three levels of desire is essentially what I call it. But that's one example of how it might show up in a business capacity. Like for graphic design and branding, it's like, do you feel as cool and chic and differentiated and different and special in
Yeah.
your brand and business as you want
Yeah.
to? So then we're kind of
Absolutely.
building on those desires too.
That was so fun. I like the three and the layers and like the desires of each one, and going from the contrast down to the feeling, I just think is spot on. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Such a great takeaway. And I know that you mentioned a little bit about writing and how entrepreneurs like to bring this in and potentially write a book, or even you've talked about screenplays as well. I'm curious, for those who are women in our community who want to position themselves as thought leaders, how do
Mhm.
you recommend going about doing that? Is it a book, or is it something else you recommend, and kind of what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think positioning yourself as a thought leader is just about consistently creating content that does help someone think differently about a topic. or open their mind in some way. And so practicing developing an argument in writing, practicing refining what your thoughts and ideas actually are, and creating intentional, like the first step is going to be creating intentional space for it, no matter what. Like whether we're talking about a creative project or marketing project, like whether we're creating for your personal brand or we're creating for like your inner artist. Like the first step is going to be like, put that part of you first, put it on your calendar first, give it space, give it airtime. And then the strategic choices of what you create are going to change, right? Based on what what you really want. And so if your desire is really establishing yourself as a thought leader in your space, it's going to be thinking about what are the challenges and problems in your space? What are the conversations
Mm,
that are already happening, which could be like you seeing what else is being posted, like what other content is being posted, what are other people saying about this topic, what do I have to say, what's my perspective, why is that my perspective, or what's my belief about this, and giving yourself the space and time to like write what I would call think pieces, and having and establishing a really strong perspective that's your own consistently is the only way to establish thought leadership. I think one of the big interesting disconnections I see is people coming to brand positioning, people coming to brand positioning and wanting to like foundationally create what their brand is, right? But if they're not consistently standing in it and like creating the content to stand in it and actually writing the work to stand in it and people are getting to experience them, then not really a living, breathing embodiment of your thought leadership, right? You can have the idea, but the execution of building that is takes consistent execution. And so I can create beautiful brand positioning for someone. They have to be willing to step into their thought leadership and
mm,
consistently show up for it
mm-hmm.
for it to actualize, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that was such a great point. And I think with that word, even thought leadership has been thrown around a lot. And I feel like, as I'm coaching and I see women wanting to say, use this term, thought leadership, put myself out there because we get all these now short TikToks and reels and of podcast episodes and whatnot. That was just such a beautiful way to convey like what exactly is that? It's really having that opinion and that perspective and that maybe a unique angle or something, your own method. And it doesn't have to be something brand new. It can be like, okay, what are people talking about in this space and what is your take on it? And I think that's so great. And I think what's cool is you can build offers and services and methods around that and really utilize that as well for landing PR pieces and coming up with some sort of method, so to speak, or something that you can always talk on. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah,
Yeah, amazing.
absolutely.
Okay, so as we are wrapping up here, I'd love to ask you one final question, and that is, how has starting a business led to more freedom and fulfillment in your life?
I started my business so I could have the freedom to work on my creative projects. Like
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I know that
Mm-hmm.
I was pulled into entrepreneurship, but I think that the ultimate truth and why for me is and always has been like the freedom to be able to pursue what I feel creatively drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
And I work a lot. So it's really hard for me to even say, like, I know some people create their business so that they can like travel and have these, for me, the lifestyle I always wanted was like spacious mornings, the ability to go to coffee shops and journal, the ability to take a day off to work on a screenplay or a novel, to write what I feel like writing, and to have space and time for that, and to allow myself the space to explore that, to let it change as it changes and shift as it shifts. And so for me, it it's like it doesn't look as sexy on Instagram because it's not like here's the beautiful vistas of all the things, but like my soul truth is yeah, I just wanted that. That was it for me always, and I have that, and I've had that for a long time. So that is, that's it for me. And it's I have yeah, I can't imagine living any other way right now
Mm-hmm.
still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you go about like prioritizing that like creative space in your life? It seems like it comes very naturally to you. And I do find, I know many of our listeners are always in business taking on more and more and more. And I think they're not checking in with themselves enough and living kind of exactly like the life that you just created for yourself. What advice would you have for them? I know it's kind of an odd question, but how do you create creative space? And maybe I'm a little too logical, but I'm curious. I'm curious.
No, there's a process. Well, the first is what kind of part of what I said before, which is like put it on your calendar and make it important. Like one of the big challenges I love to give my clients, particularly entrepreneurial clients, is like give it Monday.
Mm,
Like don't
yeah.
give it Friday, give it Monday.
Yes. Yeah.
Like start your week with the thing
Mm,
that is like most nourishing for you, most important to you. And so if the truth for you is that it is your creative flexibility and freedom, like it doesn't matter if you're focused on a specific goal or if the space is just there. What I call it is, like I say, space for magic. And my big question that guides me is like, will this choice still allow space for magic? And if the answer is no, then it's a no, right? Like a choice has to allow space for magic for me. And that sounds like really unspecific, but I have a feeling in my body where I know there won't be enough space or there will be enough space, right? And in different seasons, we can make different choices around that. So what I typically recommend is that we have a seasonal approach to our creative endeavors, that we set aside more or less time for it, depending on what the season calls for. And I have different scheduling systems that I suggest, but the priority here is giving it space on your calendar and then watch what happens, because first thing that happens is people talk themselves out of it.
yes.
Um, like it's just what happens.
Yeah.
They find something else that's more important on a practical
Hmm.
level. And honestly, I think that the first challenge is like, wow, if for 4 weeks you can hold that space on your calendar and actually show up for it, even if it's an hour a week or a day a week or 2 days in that month. And if you just get to the end of 30 days and you actually showed up to just creatively be in sacred creative practice, to show up to a project you're working on, like that to me is step one, because it's a muscle you have to practice using more so than like a system you have to nail.
Mm, I absolutely agree. Yeah. As someone who is trying to expand her writing and her skills in that area, I tend to definitely put it off for more practical things. But having that muscle, I love that you said that it's just like building blocks on top of one another versus it being this, yeah, very like structured creativity. But I did also want to call attention to the fact that you're not doing it on a Friday, because I've recently been helping women in our Scale with Purpose Mastermind move away from putting their either passion projects or the thing that's going to move their business forward the most on Fridays. So a lot of people are blocking off time for that, and then they weren't doing them because you get to the end of the week and everything kind of piles up, and Friday you're like already feel a little behind. And I've noticed a big shift in our women moving things to Mondays that are either top priority, whether that's in their creative space or in their business or even just for themselves. On a Monday, it is more likely that you will commit to doing it and actually accomplish it. So I did want to just call attention to that piece of advice as well. So as we're wrapping up here, I'd love to know, where can we connect with you? Where can we learn more about you?
I think the best place is Instagram.
Okay, cool.
So I'm at Jamie Lynn Jensen on there. I am happy to have a DM chat if anybody has follow-up thoughts or questions. I'm a DM chatter. So that's a great place to check me out. My Substack is listed there. And my agency brand is Scribe and Spirit. So that's has its own Instagram account, its own website, and all of that. So yeah, I would say depending on what someone wants to stay on top of, that would be the best place to, get in touch.
Amazing. I'll make sure all of that's linked in the show notes. And thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Jamie.
Thank you for having me. It was such a joy.
Amazing. Well, I'll catch everybody who tuned in today in another episode of the Freedom Filled Life podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.